Welcome, my name is Don Morrill. I'm the Executive Director of the New York Technology Council, and tonight we're going to be talking about enterprise sales, which is a topic that has been requested quite a bit in the past year or so. You may recall at some of our other events we hand out event surveys afterwards, and enterprise sales is one of the top requested topics of those surveys, and so we're happy to have Aaron here tonight to talk about that topic. Real quick, our sponsors for 2012, the accounting firm Advisor Amper, Google, Power Space and Services, TGP Associates, Verizon, Information Builders, IBM, and Frankfurt Kernet. Thanks to all of our 2012 sponsors for supporting the organization. Also want to give a special thanks tonight to Holland Knight for hosting our event. And that's all I have tonight. I'd like to turn it over to Aaron. I believe you all have his bio there, so I'm not going to go into any detail, and you can take it here.
Thank you very much. Let's see, quick show of hands who are here at the last sales and marketing event. Okay, just a couple. So let me set the context tonight. Whenever I've hosted panel events or attended ones that I felt were effective, they were directed at helping the audience. This isn't about us talking at you guys. It's about understanding what some of the problems are that you're trying to solve and trying to address them. We do have some prepared questions here on the topic in general, so hopefully we can push out a little bit of content that you might not have thought about, but we're going to encourage very active engagement. As a couple of folks have been to one of my events before will remember, it's very much engaging the audience. I'm going to ask you questions. We expect you to ask questions, interject, and help set the tone here. The goal for me tonight would be that each of you who came specifically for this topic in general of enterprise sales or sales in general takes away something actionable, something that you can apply to the business problems that you're trying to solve on a daily basis. We have a panel of folks who have a lot of experience and expertise in this area. I'm really grateful for these folks to stepping up and staffing the panel here, because I certainly could never provide the answers, the content, or the rich experience that they have had. Let me get a show of hands here to start with. How many salespeople in the room? How many people are in sales? Okay. How many people who are in marketing? All right. How many people who are in technology specifically, engineering, CTO, office of CTO, etc., and how many senior executives, general management positions? Okay, so we've got a good mix across. That helps. How many people here sell to enterprises? Okay, so it looks like maybe 60%, and that very accurate straw poll there. How many people in the room are in an organization with more than 1,000 people? Okay, mostly we're in the SMB world. Let's see how else it is. How many people in a company with greater than 100 people? How many people in a company with greater than 10? How many people in a company with only 2 or 3 people in business? Okay, so we've got some very small businesses in the room. That's generally a mix I think we find in these kinds of things and what we're prepared to talk about. And certainly some of the questions are directed at that. Let me set the context first. I'm going to have the panelists introduce themselves one by one and just offer a couple of bullet points about their thoughts and experience in this realm. But let's start the agenda by just kind of defining what it is we're talking about. Tom, why don't you take a crack at this? Define enterprise sales. Grab any one of them. I think you may have to flip the.
Well, there we go. We're starting out well. So enterprise sales is the ability, from my perspective, is to sell your offering into an organization across a wide range of departments within it. Okay, so it's not a single, it's a strategic kind of sell to the organization. Process is ever-changing.
Okay. So let's, if we think about the context of the panel session tonight, it's enterprise sales, but it's enterprise sales in the context of change, changing world of enterprise sales. So Scott, let's start with you down on the end there. You can pass the mic around, or we've got the little mic on the stand right there. What are we talking about? What's changing?
So if you look at enterprise sales, over the last, I would say 20 years ago, right, it was a very large and heavy sale, right? Typically 4-legged or 6 or 10-legged sales calls. You'd bring a lot of people, you'd be talking to a lot of people on the other side of the room, and the deal sizes would be hopefully in the millions of dollars, right? In the software world especially, that world has completely changed, right? So open source, software as a service, platform as a service, now it's about frictionless commerce. So enterprise sales has completely been redefined, where now you are actually selling enterprise, but you're doing it typically one at a time. And the end users are self-selecting whether or not they want your product. They don't want you to come in and give them a big pitch. They don't want the 4-legged sales call. If the product is working for them and it grows, then you might have the opportunity to go interdepartmental with either a larger team, or sometimes you can actually close it without a lot of sales calls. That's in the software world. But then if you look at other worlds, for example, I just went from software to clean tech and energy storage. I feel like I've gone back in time 20 years. Every meeting we go on is a 4, 6, 8-legged phone call. We're meeting with 20 people on the other side of the room. We're talking about $20, $30 million deals over 5 and 10 year periods. So I feel like it's back in 1990 in that world. Part of me still does some software, and in the software world, it's nothing like that at all.
I should ask another question. How many people in the room have been selling to into enterprise sales for more than 10 years? Okay. How many people more than 5 years, but less than 10? Okay, so we've got some folks in the room who have seen change. Chuck, let's hear your perspective. What's changing? What's different?
So, 8 years ago, I came out of consulting. I'm in consulting now, but I came out of consulting with Deloitte for a decade, where selling there into the enterprise was the weight of a large consultancy behind you and selling services and selling technology with that. I went into financial services, and as Scott alluded to, it felt like I went back in time. But what happened over those 6 years that I was at what was Commerce Bank, TD Bank, was that the purchasing on the buyer side was changing, and it was a precursor to, I think, what exists now, just a couple years out, having left, out in the cloud. What was happening was there was more diversity occurring across the organization, and so when people would come in to sell to us, it was becoming more and more difficult to get that large group around the table and to talk to one thing. Everybody had different ideas of what they wanted and different things that they wanted to draw from. And I would say in the intervening 2 years, it's gotten even more diverse and more scattered, in that everybody now can go out into, especially the technology, and draw exactly what they want out of this new model that's out there that's not as well defined. And so now the question is, now that I'm back on the sell side, how do I sell that? How do I bring all those components without toting a huge bag behind me in to get to the different folks, the different constituencies, and make some sort of cohesive sale to that?
All right, Jeff, you got the first stab at solutions. What are we doing differently these days? What are some of the approaches to being successful in selling into the enterprise now in the face of something that is in flux?
Well, I'm not sure how new it is, but the subscription model is big. I've been doing subscriptions since '99, and the subscription model is a lot different than the way it used to be. It used to be there would be a big sale, the $20, $30 million sale, and now instead you can sometimes go department by department with a smaller sale, building up, getting one department to buy in on a much easier price point, or instead of having to convince a $30 million deal, you can convince a department. Example I remember was WebEx, before they got bought by Cisco. What they would do is they would go in and they went over a small department, it would work there, and then they would work their way through other divisions. And so what I'm seeing is, especially with the cloud, I don't know, again, not knowing the audience, but industry by industry by industry within technology, more and more is moving to this subscription model where you're paying per month and where you can do it. And the enterprise is moving more and more where you can do it into a smaller and smaller department. One of my clients one of their clients has locations in 26 offices in 26 cities, and they start off winning one city software service, and then over time they can try to win multiple cities, which is a much different paradigm than it was before.
So you're saying the sales becoming much more decentralized, you're moving away from the office of the CIO, you could be selling to anybody, the decision-making unit has fundamentally changed.
Especially if you're, I think if you're a smaller company, the way, I would argue that the way, if you're a smaller company, 2-3 people, it's gonna be much harder to win that $30 million deal for somebody to take a chance on you, but it's a lot easier for somebody to take a chance on you, especially if there's something really different about you and unique about you, to get a department to win over, because then you may have one decision maker or 2 decision makers versus a much bigger decision where people don't want to get fired for making the wrong decision.
First audience question, let's build, come on.
That's good in principle, but ideally you want to sell a business user to solve particular problems for that user, but invariably you got to cross IT. And so depending on, I guess, the application, but in regulated industries like financial or pharmaceutical, they're very concerned about the one-off use, and so you can speak to having to sell both the IT and the user.
So you're saying it depends on the audience very much.
Well, I mean, in our case, we have technology that business intelligence and email-related technology, and so you have to cross-exchange, okay? And, you can touch SharePoint or CRM, but the key part of it is exchange, and so companies are very sensitive about doing anything with email, and even where companies want to test the product outside, in a cloud-type solution that we offer, or a hosted local solution which we can offer, you still got to get some kind of approval from the corporate IT exchange area. And that's a potentially huge obstacle.
I don't think that's changed. I mean, I think that the way organizations evaluate, I think the process got put on its head a little bit, and that is because of all the information that's available. So, in the past, as a vendor, you always wanted to try to control the information, control the process, give information when it's necessary. And today, that information is being researched from a wide variety of different sources, and then you're called. So, for example, I had a friend who went out to the West Coast, big company, sits down for a presentation, and they said, well, we've been looking at your software for over a year. And they had no clue and no idea that was happening. So I do think, I mean, in my experiences, even though we're selling a different way than we used to, we still have to pass the hurdle of IT, and that's life. But they bring you in, you're brought in at a different stage, and you have to be much more receptive to what the customer's agenda is as opposed to yours.
I agree, and so I'll give you an example. So we have, we're talking to the top one center bank, and you have validation from a senior level, a reasonable level user, and it lands in the IT department, and the guy says, I got 100 projects. Where do you fit my priority? So.
Yeah, so sales, hasn't changed. Sales is sales, right? The difference is, and I think where you need to spend your time thinking about it is what I'm noticing is a lot of people are making mistakes by trying to sell the same way they always sold, but changing some of the dynamics of the game. So for example, if you are going to introduce a software as a service or a freemium type of model, you can't have an enterprise sales force plugging that, right? Because the cost of that sales force is not commensurate with the amount of money you're gonna make. Right? So you have to have a model that says, all right, if we're going to do this and we're going to make $50 a month, we need 1,000 customers, right, at $50 a month, which means we need to do some sort of marketing program that can get out to 100,000 people so you can get a 1% conversion rate. The thing that enlightened me was there was a venture capitalist up in Boston who had actually done a long study of this, everything from freemium and open source all the way up to enterprise sales. And his going in assumption was, every time you go from one cheap model to a more expensive model, the cost of sale doubles, right? So going from like freemium to software as a service doubles, and then software as a service to inside sales doubles, and then inside sales to enterprise sales doubles. Well, it turns out after they interviewed all their portfolio companies and a whole bunch of other customers and everything, they found out it wasn't a doubling, it was exponential. So the cost of an enterprise sale, just in rough numbers, was about $150,000. Right? So if you're only making $100,000 on that deal, you're losing money on every single deal. So the first thing you have to do is think about, so we could talk all night about, how do you handle the coach, how do you handle the champion, how do you handle objections, how do you handle the, the gatekeeper, all that good stuff, right? I don't think any of that's really changed. You still need to have good sales skills. The question is, how much money are you gonna make at the end of that sale? Because if you're gonna make $100,000, you're losing money.
You don't wanna do it.
You can't. You can't.
No, of course not.
You go out of business.
But if you're looking at $1 million a year sale,
Sure. So for $1 million a year sale, like what I'm doing now, right, we can march in at GE with 10 people,
right.
right? Now, I still think there's issues with that too, because it's fraught with a lot of inefficiencies, right? But at the end of the day, you make that up when someone writes a check for $20 million, right? But if you're selling software, I will, put a stake down and say, if you're selling software, you better be looking hard at your enterprise sales strategy, because more than likely it's broken or flawed.
So we've seen fragmentation, we've seen changes in the nature of the decision-making unit, we see the customer self-educating and effectively sales getting engaged directly much later in the sales cycle. Because with the push of marketing and availability online, the customer can find out a lot of what they want to know without ever having to speak to anybody in the sales team. How do you combat that? Chuck, what are your thoughts?
I think it comes down to building relationships. I mean, it always in sales is about the relationship, and if you can establish that, I mean, that's harder to do. And how do you choose who's coming into all your different channels, whether they're social media or your website? I think at some point, and I don't have the answer to this, I think at some point you have to decide where your value is, and then go after the characteristics of the folks coming in these channels that are recognizing that value. And I think that's unique depending on your product, depending on the level of the service you're offering. I don't know, that's my best take at it.
Got it. So, follow-on question there is building relationship, define relationship. Scott?
So, a relationship is going to be the interaction that you have with the person on the other side of the room, whether it's a virtual room or a physical room. So, to answer the last question a little bit, my feeling is if you can't beat them, join them, right? I mean, these days people are asking for information. As Tom said, we've been researching your product for a year. They're gonna find, if they can't find information out about you these days, you're gonna be disqualified. So don't worry so much about, my competition's gonna find out what I'm doing, or, nobody frankly cares, right? Until you become really successful. Then maybe they'll start caring. But, 2-person startup, 3-person startup, they don't care. So put it all out there. Be as open and as friendly as you can be. Create relationships. You want as many touch points as you can get, right? And some small percentage of those touch points are actually gonna work for you. And you have to realize that too. That, if you have a 1% or a 2% conversion rate, that's actually pretty good, right? And then those 1 or 2% will recommend you to their friends. And that's how you build your business. So it's all about volume. And if you're doing an enterprise sales, the volumes can be smaller, right? So if I'm doing a $20 million sale, I really only need to talk to maybe 50 to 100 potential customers and get 3 or 4 of them to close, and then I'm good. Right? But if I'm going to do something at $100 a month or even $1,000 a month, right? I need thousands and thousands of interactions and relationships, and you can't do that one-on-one. You have to do that in a much more voluminous way, right? So that's where mass marketing comes in. That's where social media comes in. So you don't always need to do these things. You don't have to do social media if you only need 50 customers. But if you need 1,000, it's imperative. You can't physically touch 1,000 people.
Scott, I'm sorry, do you think that has to, from the prospect's perspective, they have to feel like that's right for them, right? It has to feel like it's one-to-one, even if you're doing 1 to zillions, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean,
The
everyone
way you
wants,
present is important.
Yep, absolutely. The more customized you can make it, the better. But clearly, if you're doing a mass marketing approach, that's not going to be as customized as me picking up the phone and saying, "Hi, Chuck, how are you? Can you have lunch with me?" But again, unless I'm going to get $50 million or $20 million from you, it's not worth it for me to do that. I need to come up with a much more economical way to reach you.
So Jeff, that sounds a heck of a lot more like education than selling to me. How do you react?
Yeah, what I like to think about is two things. Why my company, and then why me? So if there's 10 companies all selling the same product, conceivably that could be solve that problem. Each of you, when is your company right for that client? And then why are you right for that company? So a lot of the time it'll come down to an advocate for the client where you're advocating on behalf of the client better than everybody else. And sometimes that means, I think as Scott was saying, you're not the right fit. And helping and understanding that you're not the right fit and that helping the client see what the right solution is for them may help you in the long run.
Okay, so who in the audience here feels like they're hearing problems that feel like the stuff that they're facing and trying to solve it or struggling with? You see any hands out here? Okay, let me hear a little bit more about that. Told you this was participatory, and Don really unleashed me tonight by giving me a wireless mic.
We're a startup and we're just building our product, so we haven't actually started the sales cycle yet, but we're planning it. And so the question is building a new piece of software, which model do we choose, how will we reach our target customers, and I'm understanding, now I'm actually pulling that backwards, working backwards, and as to how much money we need to go for when we make pitches to investors. And one of the things I'm understanding is that we're going to need to spend as much money building our website and blogs and social presence and all that as we do building the product. So that's a takeaway I'm getting.
Well, ultimately, it's all about the business model, isn't it? I mean, at the end of the day, who is your customer? What are they willing to pay for it? You know, no matter what you invest in, you know, it's all sunk cost, right? So now you have to take your product and say, all right, it has this much value, and then figure out the most cost-effective means of marketing it. The second thing is, the good news is though, and with all the information, I think for a small company and a startup, the opportunities are immense. I mean, we're an international company, and we're little, you know, but we sell all over the world. We take meetings all over the world because we have technology to do it. And people look at us a whole lot differently because they're searching based on the problem. You know, they recognize that they have a problem, and they begin searching to find a solution to it. And if we're that solution and they can cost effectively try us out, it's all good news. So, you know, you're not it's a challenge to be able to put all the pieces together, but you're not at the mercy of having to compete against large organizations with a huge direct sales force and never getting in the door.
So follow-on question to that, do you think that means that it's easier to sell in these days as a small company or harder?
It's always hard. You know, I mean, it's never going to be easy. And I, you know, at least I'm looking for the opportunity that says, you know, life is easier. I think that I think you have more opportunities if you have a product that solves a problem people have, and they're able to find you. Right? So you build, as you talked about, product is only one small piece of an entire organization, right? So it's all about marketing and sales and where you invest. So they're able to find you, and you can then educate them in terms of what your product can do for them. Then you begin the dialogue, and the dialogue is touches in many different ways. It could be verbal, it could be email. And we've had customers that don't want to talk to us, but bought our product. No demo, you know, and I've offered, you know, but believe me, I've offered, you know, because it's all about trying to get, you know, and they go, no, it's okay. And then they just buy, you know, and it's a wonderful thing. Typically outside the US as opposed to inside.
So Chuck, then, if we think about this transformation, this change, how do you build a sales and marketing organization? What does that different sales and marketing organization look like now as opposed to what it used to look like?
I think it's got to feel small. I think about what I've done in the last 2 years to set up a small business and how I've made decisions, and then think about how that turns around, because a lot of the a lot of the organizations that I'm trying to go into may be large, but I'm now selling into a small part of that. So they're almost like a small company within it. And you do have to deal with organizations like common organizations, shared services like finance and IT, but those become standards, those become bars that you have to meet. I think that the key then is to setting up marketing where, again, I come back to, it's what resonated with me when I purchased, some hosted platform, or I got someone to design my website, or these different things. And it comes back to, did I feel like when I went and did the information, when I did the research, when I talked to them, if I did that, and I don't always do that. Sometimes I just buy, I don't want it, the little thing pops up and it says, can we help you? And I'm like, no, I can't get rid of it fast enough. So, but there's other times where those emails that come in that, you sign up and you start getting the emails, and then every once in a while I'm like, that's a really great thing. And so I let them come in. So I think from the perspective of selling now, all those different things that you can choose, they all have a place. Now it comes back to what is it that you're selling. I sell a lot more services, I don't sell product. So for me, it's about making sure that the value is seen in the services as I go out and market. And in the last year, I've completely changed how I'm gonna go and do marketing. It's gonna be more focused on very specific value attributes that I can emphasize, as opposed to lists of things that I could do. Well, that doesn't matter. People wanna know how it helps them.
Questions? Sahim.
This is for Jeff Silbert. We have an interesting situation. We are a startup company. We wrote to the CEOs of 20 Fortune 100 companies in November. 12 of them are already in discussions with us. And what I'm trying to sort out in my mind, since it's a SAS situation, is to how we price this situation to companies that have, in many cases, a marketing budget of more than $1 billion. And can we charge them $200,000 to start and go to $1 million over 3 or 4 years? I'd be very interested to hear any thoughts you have on something like that.
That's a good problem.
Yeah, well. Pricing is interesting, but the advice I typically have is, do you have clients already, reference clients?
As I said, we're a startup, but what's happened is we've got 12 corporations in dialogue right now. We don't have revenues, but that's where we...
No revenues and no clients yet?
No, but a lot of discussion with very big companies.
So I'll give you a quick two-part answer. The first part is, I love reference customers. So if you have 0 customers, you do whatever you can do to get that first client, even if it's a great deal for them, but they have to be willing to go on record in the media and help you win other deals. And then once you have enough of those, then you go big. By big, you want to aim big, not small, with pricing for other clients in a model. But the first thing before you get there is get those first few initial clients that can help you win additional clients, win partners, get some identity for your product and your company first.
And I'll give you a couple of thoughts there. What's the cost of their pain?
Quite substantial.
That's the cost.
Price it at half the cost of the pain.
The hard thing is they don't necessarily know what the cost of their pain is, except it's substantial.
That's a little difficult. Then that was the next suggestion was make sure that you can actually prove the pain and they believe your proof points. So that's a very marketing answer. A great sales perspective I've heard on this, and I can't profess to be any good at this, is pick a number and look them in the face and say it's $100. If they don't blink, you say per month. If they don't blink, you say per seat. And you keep going until you see the lines form in their forehead and you stop.
So there's 2 points actually on this and the previous conversation. There's a guy named Steve Blank who wrote a book called 4 Steps of the Epiphany. And if you haven't read it, I strongly urge you to read it. And so there's 2 aspects to that based on the last 2 conversations. The first one is from a sales and marketing perspective, and I have this written right above my computer in my office, is nail it before you scale it. When it comes to sales and marketing, don't go hire, Chuck's absolutely right, small is best. Don't go hire 20 sales guys thinking that each one's gonna close $1 million and that's how you're gonna become a $20 million company. You, the founder, the CEO, have to create that cookbook for your sales team. And you have to know that you figured out a repeatable way to win business. And then you go hire salespeople and say, do A, B, and C, you should see D, E, and F, and then if you do that, you'll get a deal. And if you don't, I'm gonna fire you. Right? And it's as simple as that. And that's how quickly you fire sales reps. If they can't follow the simple instructions, either you did it wrong or they're doing it wrong. So, either step aside or fire them. But don't go hire a ton of people until you figure out how to sell. With regard to your problem, I'd love to have your problem. But also be careful, because as Jeff said, you haven't sold anything yet, and so you're still trying to figure out the cookbook, right? But you're doing the other thing that Steve Blank says, which is get out of the building and talk to people. So you're out and you're talking to people. What I would urge you to do is, of the 12 people that are still talking to you, make sure that you've uncovered what's repeatable in that sale. That there's something you've built that you can sell over and over again, and that you don't have to customize for each individual customer. Because if you have to do that, that increases your sales cycle, that will increase the amount of services you have to do on every deal, right? If you can build a widget and sell that widget over and over again, then you will come up with the right price. Whatever it is, you will make money on that if it's repeatable. If you have to customize it every time, you can still make money, it's just a lot harder.
Thank you.
Okay, we had another question back here. If you would, state your name, your company, just so we get a sense of where you're coming from.
Hi, Jordan Stolper, Story Desk. My question was for Tom. You made an earlier comment about your customers can try your product out at an affordable price before deciding to go forward. One of the things that we're struggling with is making sure that that price is substantial enough that it suggests the level of complexity or substantial enough that it suggests that the price which is to come of the ultimate cost of the product is high enough that they don't, it's not devalued, but low enough that the barrier is low. That's more articulated, but do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, and for us, I mean, we do it in a couple of ways and experimenting with them as well. Part of it is saying, okay, the price of the product will get us in the door in one area, for example, and then you can build off of that. But we have a free trial. We're experimenting with the free version of the software so that people can actually work with it and experiment with it. I think pricing is one of the hardest things to do. And when I came on board, the first thing I did was raise the price 20 times. And the price was out on the web, it was out on the net. And the first person that talked to us said, we saw what you had, how much is it? And the first comment was, well, that's a lot more than what we saw. And you have to explain all the value. And it turned out that they were willing to buy it at whatever price we had, and it was minimal to them. But I think what you want to do is you want to lower the barriers to entry. So I don't know anything about your product. Can you sell many of them? Or is it one and you want them to?
Yeah, so we make iPad apps for sales teams that can be scaled across an organization and remotely updated by a marketing manager. So there's a level of customization to it, but it's light.
Right. So then small group, validate within the organization, and then scale. And have your pricing based on that.
Sure. Great advice.
How you address it's tough. It's how much is involved in getting that first sale? How much you're going to get?
Right. The question is inevitably, if it only costs us $5,000 to get this, and I don't understand what we're getting if we go larger. For us, it's almost zero marginal cost to go from the sort of the baby version than it is to the grown-up version. So maybe that's.
It's all about value. I mean, I remember when I first implemented a software, so I'm going to use an old word, a diskette, right? So I went into a customer and we were charging them $40,000 for the software. And they said, but it only comes on this little plastic thing that must cost $5. So how much more does, how much does it cost for us to implement that what's it worth? It's nothing, it's a marginal sale to you. And then you have to be able to sell value. As Scott said, sales haven't changed. It has to be valuable to the organization. You have to be able to speak to it.
Thanks.
Yeah, so you never price to cost. You price to value. You gotta know what the value is before you know what the value of your product is. And the ultimate value is what somebody's willing to pay for it, right? Got a question up here.
Me?
Yeah, shout it out, come on.
Jerry Locke, Core Interactive Marketing. I have a question for, if we could, a question that possibly each of the panelists could answer. So the buying criteria, what factors they use to measure one vendor over another and ultimately to arrive at a decision to choose a vendor. So what do you think is the single most important buying criteria, and has it changed? Is it new? Or has it always been the same, it always will be, and this?
The buying criteria, your goal is to know ahead of time where you're better at than anybody else in the whole world. And what you're looking to do is for that buying criteria to be based on your view of the world. Your view of the world. You have to believe, going back to gentlemen here, that you know, selling to the IT department, I don't know much about your product, but my view of the world is depending on the product, you may not have to sell to the IT. You may be able to get the sales manager or the marketing manager or the CEO or the GM to agree on the purchase. So first, it's your personal mindset on where you believe you have the strongest advantage, and then what you're looking to do is find clients where your differentiation, where you're strongest, leads the buying criteria for the client.
So I'll give you the smart guy answer, and then I'll try to answer it. So the smart guy answer is it depends, right? I mean, this is art, not science. So it's really, you know, who are you selling to, how big or small is the product, you know, how many different buyers are there in the organization. I mean, all those things are going to have a piece to play in terms of how you determine value. The one thing I will say is that I was working on a very large enterprise deal, you know, probably 8 years ago, and it was very competitive. You know, we wound up winning, which was great. But the thing that resonated with me when it was over is I took the buying guy out to lunch, you know, and I said, so what was it at the end of the day? Was it this feature? Was it? He says, no, it was you. He said, at the end of the day, we came back and any one of these products could have done the job. You have to realize that all your competitors, they can do the job, right? Sitting there slamming your competition is not doing you any good at all. They can do the job. If they can't, they won't be in business for very long, right? It's about your salesmanship. It's about the presentation, how they feel about you, how they feel about your company. So that's the one thing, that's what I would say it is. So if you're doing an enterprise sale, your sales guy better be the best freaking sales guy in the world. If you're doing a mass market sale, you better have someone like Jeff who knows how to do marketing such that your company is viewed as the best company in the world.
So the question was, what changed? Nothing. I mean, you may get in front of people a different way, you may get there faster, but at the end of the day, it's whether they believe that you can do the job. It's always, because their careers are at risk. So the criteria is all about how you get to the customer and your offering. But the buying criteria, in my mind, it hasn't changed at all.
I'll make an analogy. It's like going to the supermarket and buying fish. If you go back to the fish counter and it's dirty, smelly, you're not buying. If you go back there and it's clean, well presented, it might not even be the best price. Somebody's familiar with shopping there, they like that, they're gonna buy it because it's what they need at that time. So I think it's culture, it's who you are. I think at the end of the day, I go back to, especially when you're small, you're selling, you are selling. It's not even your company, it's you. They're buying you. And so as long as you have a valuable solution to the end user, to the buyer, and you present well and the culture matches, it's a sale. And if it's not a sale, you'll find out that the reason was there's other factors that you didn't know about. And if it's a criteria, if you get into one of those situations, a request for proposal, and all these factors, the more you can learn about them, the better. But ultimately, you're not looking at what the individual factors are, you're looking at how they add up and what are they doing with that. Is it just gonna be a straight add? We did this all the time at the bank. We would just have people rate all these things, and it's arbitrary, but then these numbers come out and the total's at the bottom. Okay, 55 is better than 50. Yeah, but we're not buying the 55 because we like the guy, or we went on the golf thing, or whatever, right? So that hasn't changed.
Brian, you had a question?
Yeah,
So it's Brian Turchin, Cape One Strategies. One of the traditional ways in enterprise sales of dealing with value is ROI. But I guess regular skepticism, you know, and certainly from a financial perspective, that's what you used to do in order to do it. I'm wondering if you're dealing with that, and if so, how do you deal with the skepticism that people have? If you show them ROI, they just go, I don't believe you.
I didn't believe anybody when they came in and talked about ROI when I was the buyer. So I think from my perspective, it's really understanding and articulating back to the customer, potential customer, what it is that they're feeling for pain. Can you really examine that, and can you talk to what the value is that they're going to get? And it might be a cost savings, it might be opportunity costs that they can take advantage of. It might be new features or things that they can do. But you've got to be able to then put a number next to that, and that's really where the sales come in. You've got to convince them that your numbers are good, and that at the end of the day, there will be an ROI.
Ultimately, they have to acknowledge that there's a problem, associate value with that problem. They'll figure out the ROI after that. They're not going to believe you. You know, let me rephrase. They don't believe me. You know, they just, you know, it's identifying the problem and crystallizing in a way that it's very clear what you're doing to help solve that problem.
How about presenting a model for calculating the ROI and letting them do it themselves?
So I'm doing exactly that now. It's been amazing to me being at GE and having worked at so many startups, you know, where you're very scrappy and you just kind of do what it takes, and then you go to GE and they've got all these processes in place and you got to follow these rules. So one of the things they do is, you know, let's give them the ROI. And I hate it. I hated it when we first started, and I still hate it. The fact is, I feel like it's very preachy. I agree with Tom completely. You know, who the hell am I to tell you how you're going to get your ROI? You know it better than me. What I want is for you to say to me, Scott, help me. I'm going to show you something here. I'm doing an ROI spreadsheet. I want you to help me figure out how or why your product will be better. Then I know I'm in. Right? So what I try to do is step back. So I actually do, so my compromise with GE is exactly what Aaron said, is I created this little TCO calculator. It's got a whole bunch of things down the left-hand side, and all the dollar amounts are blank. And I email it to the customer and I say, if you'd like to fill this out, I'd be happy to work on it with you. But I don't want to be so presumptuous as to tell you that this is how much you're going to spend if you don't go with me, and here's how much you're going to save if you do go with me. It's not going to work.
So I think I'm hearing you say that successful sales is helping a customer solve their problems. That's what your goal as a salesman is, to help solve a customer's problem. Okay? So it sounds like most of the fundamentals in selling haven't changed. The reasons people buy haven't changed. It's just the method of sales and marketing to get there based on the technologies that are available for people to self-educate and solve their problems these days to a large extent. It's reformatting your sales and marketing organization to match the way people buy now.
Hi, Stu Silverman, Impact Simulations. Years ago, we used to market and sell to large organizations, principally chain retailers. And we really were, at that point in time, selling to the CIO. And the CIO was not only was a gatekeeper, but was a guy who really rounded up all the cats in the organization to make sure that they got a decision in place. So what we're saying up here is that, well, we really need to be selling to the departments, smaller, sell to the business users and justify it there, but isn't the IT organization still a gatekeeper? And don't we still need to, and has their thinking changed here in 2012?
What do you think their thinking was in 2002?
That they were the masters of the enterprise systems, and they were the gatekeepers, and they created all of these structures and infrastructures, and I don't think it's that way anymore. And maybe I'm wrong. That's why I'm asking the question.
I find that IT gets involved in sales, and that's fine. They're not, you know, sometimes they can be the enemy, sometimes they're not. Just like, you know, we sell into financial leverage. Sometimes the controllers are friends, and sometimes they're not. I think that they recognize their position within the organization as being there to help the organization in the end, and not create a a vast mess of systems. On the other hand, I mean, you know, they have responsibilities just like anyone else, and so whether they're the gatekeeper or not, oftentimes you can't get your stuff on. So when we talk about a freemium or even a free trial, sometimes they can't be loaded on a person's machine because IT has shut that down. They don't have the authority to do that. They end up loading our stuff on their own personal machines, and there's problems with that. But we don't have, if you can, again, provide enough value, that message gets to IT as well.
So the whole issue about so much more stuff existing in the cloud versus on their own servers, no big difference?
I mean, they're gonna have perspectives on the cloud as well, maybe good or bad.
Yeah, I think IT is still very involved. It's how you engage with them. So if there's a way for IT to understand and get to use your product in a seamless way, then I think you have a better chance of making them your friend, your champion, versus if you still try to sell that old-fashioned way that Tom talked about earlier, where you the vendor are trying to manage the entire process. In this day and age, I would say you're not going to win any friends, from the CIO all the way down, right? So make it seamless, make it streamlined, and what I like about selling in this day and age compared to 10 years ago is you don't need to engage with all those IT people now. You basically just need to get the checkbox. So how do you get the checkbox? Most of the time it's make the software easy for them to use and play with so they can make a recommendation. That requires you to give up some control, but I would say that control is really expensive, right? Because you need a person or set of people constantly talking to those IT people to make sure everything's going okay. So if you can do it where you're getting a 30 or 40% hit rate without having to talk to them at all, and they're basically saying, checking the box for the CIO so they can make the purchase, or this VP of marketing or sales or wherever it is, it's better for you anyway. So why not make that, enable that?
Archimedes said, give me a big enough lever and a place to stand and I'll move the world, right? You may have a really big lever, but you better give the customer a place to stand. They need a reference point. They need to understand how you can compare what it is you have to what they are accustomed to. Because it's very difficult for people to make a huge quantum jump, step leap out from where they are. People tend to move iteratively. So help them place it in the context of something they already understand. Give them a place to stand.
Given, let me ask a question another way. Have you seen any changes or any new techniques for lead generation, given that now the internet and email and white papers are just flooding mailboxes? How do you rise above the noise to get the attention of the people that you're targeting?
Jeff, you want to take that one? I certainly have a point of view on that as well. Okay, so here's the fundamentals. You're talking about email flooding their inboxes. We talked about subscription earlier and sign up. You're talking about outbound. You're talking about interruption marketing. You want another good book to read? Pick up Seth Godin's seminal work, Permission Marketing. That was the beginning of the concept here. People don't want to be talked at. They don't want to be interrupted. They want to go find the solutions to their problems. That's inbound marketing. It's another reasonably good book on this. It's not fabulous, but it helps you understand a lot of the principles. It's just called Inbound Marketing. It's written by the guys who founded HubSpot. So if you have a problem that people are looking to solve, they're looking for solutions. They're searching. Be findable. That came up earlier tonight. That's Inbound Marketing 101. Make sure that you are producing material that is worthy of being found. If it's worthy of being found and you structure it right, it will be found. Now, there's a gentleman here, Robert Weiss, does a fair amount of content marketing generation. I want to ask him to chip in on this. But a lot of that relates to content marketing as well. What is the educational material? What's the curriculum you're putting out there? Here's a fundamental mental change for you to make in thinking about how you push material out to the customers. Stop being an advertiser, start being a publisher. That's David Meerman Scott. If you read the New Rules of PR and Marketing, that's another seminal work here that if you're interested in the topic, you absolutely should pick up. But he talks about if you want to hire somebody, if you're really struggling to hire somebody in this, a really interesting thought. Don't hire an experienced marketer, hire a journalist. Why? Because journalists think about supplying information to the audience wants to read, not what we want them to hear. Marketers are classic at telling the customer what we want them to hear. I mean, how many people have seen in their own companies a piece of marketing material? It's just another version of the gobbledygook manifesto, right? It says, we are the market leader. How many people don't have a piece of marketing that says we're the market leader in something? Tell me what market leader means. It's your own phrase. Nobody cares about that. Or it means nothing. Solve their problems. That's the sales piece. But help them understand what the potential solutions to their problem are. They got a problem. They're looking for a solution. And if the problem is broken widgets, you can guarantee that broken widgets is the keyword that you need to make sure that you rank for.
Yeah, I'll disagree a little bit on that. On the market leader piece, I work with my clients all the time on this. If you have 100 financial services clients already using you, and you let the world know you have 100 financial service clients, and they talk about you and you've been in the press, I guarantee you're gonna have a lot easier time getting that 101st client to be you. So I like to work on what is my identity, what's unique about me, where if I have those 100 financial service clients, and let's say everybody I'm competing against every time 4 other companies, and there's 5 of us, 1 of us is gonna win, and 4 of us is gonna lose. Even if you have 5 great salespeople, only 1 person can win, right? So what you wanna do is figure out, where am I better than 4 out of the other 5? And if I have 100 financial service clients, and you have 1, you have 1, and you have 1, and I can say I have this client, that client, that client, and that client, with referrals, with the media talking about me, with a solution that I've done time and time again, with perfect knowledge, you're going to win more than the other 4 companies. You're going to win that game. So what I like to work on is, where can I win the game more often? To me, selling is a game. Except there's a lot, it's not one-on-one, it's one-on-one, on-one, 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 on-one. And what you're trying to do is figure out, where do I have the better odds, where I'm going to win more often than the other people I'm competing against.
Hi, my name is Tony Grass, President of eMarket Intelligence. To go with what Aaron was saying, and I had the most tremendous respect for sales and what goes into it, a high degree of professionalism. What we do is we get leads and sales for our clients. We do it basically by running the search engines backwards to find those folks who already need the features and benefits that you're offering. We find that you cannot sell to people what they don't want. So why not flip it around and find the people who already want what you're offering? It's that simple. The results have been terrific. We have a methodology for it. It takes nothing away from sales, because you still need the professional touch. And I want to say that also because I come from an enterprise background, micro-tech, biotech, selling to the major pharmas, thousands and thousands of seats, took a company from nothing to a buyout by Pharmacopoeia.
So Robert had stepped out of the room when I was talking about content marketing earlier, so I'm putting you on the spot here. I told you I was going to pick on people. At least there's some space here I know that I can pick on. So Robert's company does a lot of content marketing. We're talking about content marketing. We're on the topic of inbound marketing now. You do a lot of video. Just give me a little bit of perspective here. I think you have a few things to say on that.
That was a softball. I've got a question too, but do you want me to respond first? I guess. So, you talk about differentiating yourself. You talk about the personal touch. You talk about being friendly and being likable. You're talking about IT, speaking to IT. Video is a great way to do that. And one of my questions was, it sounds like that the buying process has changed from the buyer perspective because of the internet. Because the internet has allowed all of us to make our own decisions in the beginning, the middle, and the end of the process. But the selling cycle hasn't really changed. A lot of the old strategies are still in place, the salespeople. And my question was, what are some of the tactics that you're using that you might change up? And you know, when I think about video, I was talking to Jeff earlier about uses of video in IT, selling to IT, and how a salesperson doesn't have to be a salesperson anymore, because you've got 7 videos of your technical staff. And you want the technical team on the client side, potential client, to understand the functionality, and your technical team, then give them the videos. It's that personal touch that you can have, and it strengthens relationships. So. And it's great content.
So again, I'll try to answer that in the previous discussion. There's no magic, right, to marketing or sales. Right? So the last gentleman who talked about the reverse search engine marketing, I mean, that sounds like a great idea. It probably brings some high quality leads in. I would use that as one part of an overall strategy. So it's probably my math background. I look at everything in terms of numbers. But every company I've been at, you can create a funnel. And in the funnel, leads or something goes in on the top, right? And it goes through the sausage grinder, and some percentage, fall out and get from suspects to prospects, and then some percentage falls out from prospects to, qualified leads, and then some percentage of that, you close. Your job is to figure out what those percentages are, right? And to figure out what's the average sales price of my product. So at the end of the day, if I want to make $1 million this year, my average sales price is $100,000. I need 10 paying customers. Well, if I need 10 paying customers, how many prospects do I need? How many suspects do I need, right? And you basically, it's simple math, right? What I've always done is for each section of that funnel, I say, what is it that I need to provide the people when they're in that part of the funnel? And my last company, it was videos. We decided that we needed to get something, because it was a very technical product, and when you read all of our copy on the website, it's like, even I read it, like, well, what the hell do we do? Right? And we figured the only way we could do it quickly and efficiently was a video. And we spent $3,000 on this amazing video. It was 1 minute or 2 minutes long, and everybody loved it. And we got leads from that. You could track how many people went from that video to download the product, right? So that was just one example. But at each step of the way, there was different ways that you needed to engage with the different people. And sometimes you get to the point where it's IT. So up at the top of the funnel, it's not IT yet. But by the time you get to prospect, IT is involved. So you better have a section of your website that is dedicated to IT. And so that's my example. That's what I would do. And then there's all sorts of things you're going to put in each section of that funnel to make sure that you're ensuring success. But make sure you know your percentages and don't fool yourself. You will not close 50% of the deals that come into the top of the funnel. You won't even close 10. So be realistic with your numbers, and if you start conservatively, and then you're starting to do a little better than that, that's a hell of a lot better, especially if you've got VCs behind you, than if you tell them I'm going to close 20% of my deals. I guarantee you you're not. And then 6 months from now, you're going to go back to your VCs and have to explain why you're missing your targets.
So I have, my name is Seth Searchin. My company is Chair 4 Development Group. We're a startup similar to the gentleman over here. And my question kind of crosses the sales and the marketing boundary, I think, which is when you've got something for a customer that, and we follow Street Blank's methodologies as best we can, when you've got something that you're getting initial traction on at some level, so say the customer recognizes or makes an association between our platform and cost reduction, or our platform and cost reduction helping to generate new revenues, but there's still this really big educational piece. What kind of assets have you seen work best in educating the customer when your mind is, say, 10 steps ahead of theirs, and you're pretty sure that your mind is in the right place?
Did you read Steve's post today?
Listening to your customers?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the simplest answer I can give. Is you got to listen to your customers, but also make sure your job is to satisfy every single one of them, right? Your job is to satisfy a big enough percentage of them that you're going to make money. I still didn't get from what you said in terms of what's the value prop? Are customers willing to spend for that value prop? And what I heard you say is there's a gap between where they are today and where you need them to be.
close. I'm not sure, we have a complex problem that I'm trying to not confuse everybody by articulating. But it's basically that we do really, really granular measurement and operations. We have a pilot account, we've really driven down their costs. If we say to an account, hey, we can drive down your costs by 20%, that they understand. If we say to them, hey, you're measuring the way you do things incorrectly, we'll come in and fix it, 9 out of 10 don't understand that.
Yeah, that's a bad way to go. So, I think Jeff said it before, right? So you're, I just lost my train of thought. What did you say before? So,
It was memorable, though.
Yeah, exactly. Well, so do you have a paying customer yet?
Yes, we do.
Okay, so that's what Jeff had said before, that was so memorable. So you have a paying customer. What is it that they loved about it?
That they saw their cost structure in a lot more detail.
Right.
So that the point that Aaron was making earlier about levers, they could use that detail to generate cost reduction and operate more effectively than they could before they started using our platform.
So it helped them make better decisions that lowered their costs?
Correct.
Okay, by 20%?
Yeah, even more, but yes, say 20%.
Okay, oh, great. Will they say that publicly?
Depends who I've talked to at the business.
So I would say that's your number one goal. Get someone within that group to be willing to say that publicly and put that quote right on the front page of your website.
Got it.
What else do you need to say? We help people make better decisions to cut their operating costs by 30%, 40%.
And that kind of reference is quote unquote good enough on the education side. It's a long sale and our price point is not quite the numbers you were talking about before, but a good contract for us is about $500,000. So it's a long sale anyway, we're just really struggling with this education.
And so it gets people in the top end of the funnel to want to learn more, right? That's your goal. They're up here, and you just said it, it's a long process to get them down to the bottom of the funnel. So don't try to close them all in one day, right? You're just trying to educate them. So the first part of the education is give them something quick and easy they can remember that says, yeah, I need to learn more. Then you give them a little bit more, then you give them a little bit more, and you just keep going until they get it.
But ultimately, ultimately the key is that the message isn't, here's how you can measure things better. It's always, at some point in every step of that education process, this is how you can measure things better, causing you to save money. Always reinforce that behavior and then they'll love you. But if, because oftentimes I spent a lot of time in the BI world and it's great, we can do all these pie charts and we can all do stuff. We're really wonderful, but who cares? It always has to be, you tell them something, it's so what? What does it mean to them?
Yeah, focus on the result. So a prior company, we would talk about, when we were talking to the head of marketing, we enabled this company to cut their marketing budget in half without missing a lead. Who wouldn't want to, if you're a head of marketing, why wouldn't you want to hear more about that? The sausage, or what you're doing to get there, that will come later. But what's important is to focus on the end result that's exciting for the person you're talking to.
Kind of maybe a small follow-up on that line that just, and I'm not sure there's a good answer to this, but in driving down people's costs, that also generates new revenue, or should generate new revenue in our market. If there's a message around revenue increase versus cost reduction, is there a generalized answer that in your experience you've seen works better if I can advertise new revenue versus reducing costs? Is one or the other?
I think people believe more in cutting costs than being able to grow.
Yeah. If you're talking to the head of sales, I would go with the revenue.
One point around your thing is, I think the educational issue is really a visual one. If you can show sort of branches to a tree against the complexity of that client's organization operationally, and sort of show red light, green light, or different points, that educational thing will pass over into the net result. You can almost do a pictorial, you know, and it would help communicate, I think, your message better. Another thing, I just wanted to mention, a lot of Martha Poe's growth catalytics, I do believe in marketing. And I do believe in working with public relations and media, but I just wanted to say a lot of what we're talking about here today is a little somewhat jumping the gun, because some people are in a stage of investigating their marketplace and really understanding their pricing and figuring out where to go and what to do. And it's very important that at the early stage of business, you do go through that process and you do a very deep competitive analysis, a deep market analysis, because substitutes can be right at your footsteps. Pricing is something that is a science, it is not an art. There are people that study price elasticity, different competitors one against another. It is important that you come to the table ready to present your knowledge on that front when you begin conversations about sales with someone. So I just wanted to kind of draw a distinction here between the subject of market research, getting customers interested, fleshing out your product, coming up with a pricing schematic, coming up with a marketing plan, and then belting it out of the park, versus trying and infecting, because the market goes forward at market speed, and you're giving away information before you've really gotten to the table with a full-blown plan. So that's just a point to comment. So I think sometimes a marketing professional can help you do that.
One thing I push back on immediately there, Martha, though, is
Hey,
pricing is...
Aaron, we all want to disagree with her, so can we?
I get to disagree first. Pricing's a science when you have statistically significant sample body. You got a lot of startup folks in here. 4 or 5 data points cannot constitute a science. Been there too many times in startups. You just don't have enough of a body of evidence, so you can't put together a statistically significant sample, come up with any kind of empirically representative sample at the early stages. When you're bigger and you got enough data points, absolutely, totally agree with you. And a lot of the stuff we're talking about, running percentages in your sales funnel as well, you know, 4 or 5 data points does not statistics make. So go ahead. What are your other points? Come on.
No, I see, you know, people have said you don't have a good panel until you can actually disagree vehemently about something. Actually, I don't. I agree with what Aaron said. Pricing is important. Pricing is important ultimately. When you're a startup, you need to know what your pricing model is going to look like, right? I mean, how many customers you're going to capture, and what do you think the average sales price is going to be? Because that's going to dictate how you're going to go to market. But if you're a startup, you better be doing something somewhat disruptive. And if you're disruptive, that means you're doing something different than the status quo, which means you're going to look different than the status quo, and chances are pretty good you're going to price differently than the status quo. And I think Jeff also said this gem as well, which is, what's the first, you know, what's the price you take from the first customer? Whatever they're willing to give you. Right? If you don't get in the door and get that first customer and then figure out what's repeatable about your sale, I don't care what you price your product at, you're not going to go. Now, is there too low a price and too high a price? Absolutely. You can underprice your product just as easily as you can overprice it, and that's just as damaging. But to say that you'll know what it is up front, or even after the first 6, 10, 15 customers, I don't believe you can.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I had a question about that, because my startup, by the way, with Craig Strong from Savant Financial Technologies, and we have a startup. We're building a product, and our product has to do with planning and budgeting, and it's subject to network effects, meaning that our growth model is the network growth model, eBay, Amazon. Basically, the bigger it is, the more valuable it is, because it's using big data technologies. So the question there with pricing is to priming the pump. The first couple of customers, how do you sell the first 10 telephones? The value is almost nothing, right? So you almost got to give it away. So the question is, how do you get that initial, get that momentum going without, so do you get some sort of hey, there's a discount for the first 6 months or something, and then the real pricing kicks in? Because I think what I'm looking at is a possibility of having to basically give away the product for a substantial period of time just to build the momentum that we need to get into that hockey stick part of the growth curve.
Worked okay for Facebook, huh? Martha, did you want to make a rejoinder?
Well, I just want to say I work with large companies, scale GE, very large companies. And I also work with startups and review business plans. And I've done due diligence on companies. And the first thing I run suspect of is when someone comes to me and says, oh, there's a real need in this market. Because people just love our product. I want to know how many people you've talked to, how many repeatable comments you're hearing, what is new and different about what it is you offer, and that you have put some more than guesses behind your forecast. So that's my point to come back to.
I think your point is well taken. I think that if you don't plan and have an idea, I think that my perspective is, and I won't speak for the panel, but is really that you have to be flexible and you have to test and you have to kind of see, and speaking from our experience, we've had a number of different pricing models until we kind of got comfortable with, and we'll be changing that too, so that there's kind of if you're advocating that you spend all this time developing and doing the analysis and then you're going to go with the price, and that's tough. But if you can develop a method to test and see how that is, that's a much better way to go. I think the thing is, it's really about being flexible until you get enough feedback. And as far as I think the Facebook address in terms of ramping up, if you can get somebody to fund your runway long enough to be able to get enough people on board.
Yeah, there's a few of us in here who are old enough to remember sock puppets, right?
But just coming back to the Facebook analogy, is can you pick a particular target segment of customers first? So it's a big universe, so can you get 10, 100, 1,000 people that all talk to each other first? That little niche, the crossing the chasm Jeffrey Moore kind of thing, where you get that little niche going first. Even Facebook started with Harvard students looking to date each other or something like that. It didn't, and then they grew from there. So you may want to think about the niche.
So I want to go back and put Seth on the spot a little bit here. He had mentioned a number, about $500,000 for an initial sale, which is pretty substantial for a startup. So maybe you could share with us a little bit about how you arrived at your pricing?
Yeah. Let's see. That is, we charge, we're software as a service. That's our model. And actually, it was really, really rudimentary if I think about it, and it was massively flawed. But the first thing is that, and we definitely won't do it the same way, if we're successful, or even getting our next couple of accounts. But basically, I was introduced to software as a service by Salesforce. And Salesforce, I think at the time, charged $65 a month per seat for small businesses. So in my thinking, I thought, well, if I just about double that and charge, and then still keep it 2 digits, I didn't really know much about pricing. So we effectively charged about $99 per machine that we followed per month. And that's how and then we signed up our customers for multiple years, and the total value of the first contract was a bit over $500,000, but there was hardware in there too. And the renewal that we recently did was around the same level. The one thing that I want to say is why it's so flawed is that we help people become more productive. So we're actually pricing against ourselves to the extent that we help them become more productive, and we're charging on a machine from which we're collecting data basis. Those machines are constantly going down. So that's why we won't do that again going forward.
Let me pause for one moment here. We're certainly running over. It seems like everybody is still engaged, but I want to make it very clear to anybody that needs to be somewhere. We've kind of run over our allotted time. I'm going to keep going. I assume the panel is. If they get up and walk out, I'll assume I'm wrong in that. But if anybody needs to leave, go ahead. That's okay. You won't hurt our feelings, but I'm willing to keep going as long as anybody wants to keep engaged here.
Daytona 500 just did get underway, by the way, if anybody's interested.
You mean GoDaddy's advertising?
Hi, my name's Wia. I'm from Infrazopia Corporation. So how do you address like an exclusivity request? So we're a startup, and I mean essentially, I think we we foresee that we may actually get this request shortly. So what's the best way to work around that?
I mean, no. Is it a service or is it a piece of software?
So it's a piece of software.
It's a piece of software. Is there any way you can private brand it? Think about credit cards. Citibank runs credit cards for lots of different companies, and what they'll do for exclusivity is they'll put your logo on it. But then it doesn't preclude them from going and selling a different logo on a different piece of plastic. Is that possible? Just a thought.
One of the thoughts I would have on that is, you know, it's always a negotiation. I'll take exclusivity, I'll give anybody exclusivity any day of the week if they'll give me a 10-year take or pay contract on it. On exclusivity, they have to commit to meaningful volumes on this, and you have to make sure you're not trapped with one customer there, because that becomes very hard to get evaluation and exit.
I look at what's the lifetime value of that customer in that segment, and what's the opportunity cost that you're giving up by giving them exclusivity. Right? So in other words, if you're gonna get $10 million from this customer over the next 3 years, right, and if you didn't give exclusivity, you might be able to get another $10 million from the other players in the market. That's probably a pretty good risk to take, you know, $10 million in the bank to give up another $10 million market, but you can still go after, you know, all these other markets that are even bigger. But if the overall market's 100 million and you're gonna get 2 million and you gotta give up 98 million, I wouldn't do that any day of the week. So I think you have to look at what the overall opportunity cost is and what you're gonna get from this customer relative to that cost.
Who's got a problem here we haven't addressed tonight?
So we're a small software company selling to very big enterprise, and I think I'm looking for more insights or framing how you, as a small company, get in the door with big companies. You touched a bit on the positioning of IT in big companies. I think somebody said that small user groups engage them first and then expand across the enterprise, but somebody also said that you in fact need to attack the enterprise on multiple fronts, so you're doing an enterprise-wide type sale. I'm really just looking for more thoughts on how a small company can get a software product inside a big enterprise.
What's your average sales price?
Average sales price, we're software as service, and our price point's about $5,000 a year. It's event and registration software.
So your target market is the marketing folks?
It's actually a user group. We're focused on financial services, and it's the events team in financial services, in investment banks and other financial firms.
Right, so given your price structure, you can't afford a direct sales team, right? You don't want to be spending $100,000 a year for a guy that's going to sell $5,000 software. So it's got to be in my opinion, it's got to be more of a mass market approach. So you've got to come up with ways to reach these people and get them to find you through search engine optimization or blogging or social media, whatever, and have some stuff on your site that's going to give them, maybe you give them a free trial, let them do their first campaign for free, right? And then if the product works well, then they'll come back. But I mean, I don't have a specific answer. Here's how you do it. But the very first question I always ask is, what's your average sales price? If your average sales price is under $150,000, you're not doing it with a direct sales team, or else you're going to go out of business.
Can you partner with somebody? Is there another organization or another company you could be complementary to who might have that sales force that you could leverage?
Potentially, yeah.
Well, you can go to the trade associations in that category and get yourself known, and you can look at trade shows and things like that. But you could belong to a couple of the key trade associations in that field, make your name known, maybe even become a sponsor on their website, be known as the premier exclusive event person, and you become known in that terrain.
Other questions?
I've been thinking about this the whole night, and been hesitant to ask or even bring it up because of the negative connotations that two words cold calling have. But there's a lot of small businesses here that are startups. Had my business for 1.5 years and have done social media content marketing ever since I opened the doors. And it's just starting to pay dividends for me. but I've also done cold calling, and, you know, with good sales techniques, right? Value propositions, benefits, etc. I'm curious to kind of what your impression is, or anybody else's impression is, you know, calling that CMO, calling that executive vice president, and myself on the marketing side, but I guess it could be a CIO or CEO of an organization. What's their impression? And because you're pushing, they're not going out and seeking you, right? And again, we have a lot of startups here that there might not even be a market for their product or their service. You know, I do video content marketing. People are like, what's that, right? People don't really know what it is yet. So it's developing that education around it, and sometimes we push. Comments from anybody?
I think that, you know, that if again, dollars, you know, justified, that's fine. I mean, I think that there's nothing wrong with taking many different approaches. Email is push and it's disruptive, phone is disruptive, cold calling's challenging. I mean, you know, and but if you can cost effectively do it and begin a dialogue, why not?
Well, again, it was more about not whether to do it or not to do it, but the whole push versus pull philosophy and how CMOs and top level executives are actually looking at a company that's out there cold calling, rather than that person going out and seeking out that information when they know that they have that need or want that need, when they might not even know that this product or service exists out there. Thus, they don't have a need.
So what's the fundamental reason that cold calling or direct response marketing or any of those work at all? You happen to interrupt somebody at the point at which they actually had a problem, so they were willing to listen to you. You happen to come at them with the right message at the right time. We're certainly talking about inbound marketing here, and regardless of whether the engagement with a customer starts with a complete inbound find, or it starts with an interruption, could even be advertising. I don't think any one of us is saying that the old methods of selling are dead. It's just that you better have a fresh portfolio, and all the things still can work, and you can be very successful only cold calling. You could be very successful only direct response marketing. You could be very successful only inbound marketing. I think the best approach to think about here is make your best judgment about what's best for your market and test, try, see what works. I'm a huge fan of testing and marketing. I love direct response marketing because it's so numerically driven. You can really quantify marketing, which is such a challenge sometimes.
Yeah, I actually love cold calling. I'm really weird. Love cold calling. Now, it's got to be in the right context, right? For, again, a $5,000 sale, I won't cold call. It's just not worth it. For an enterprise sale, I will absolutely cold call. And I think cold calling the technology person or technology executive is really tough these days. I don't tend to do that because they like to self-select. But I'll cold call a CEO, CMO, VP of sales. They love it, right? Not that they love it, getting cold calls, but they have a business problem to solve. So if you get on the phone within 15 seconds, you've hit on a nerve of something, you're going to have a long-lasting relationship if you do that right. So that's why I love it. There's a methodology that I've been following. I got trained on it about 10 years ago, so I won't preach it here, but if you're interested afterwards, I can tell you about it. It's called frontline selling. And I think it is a foolproof way to do cold calling. I think it's awesome.
The other thing with cold calling that I found works is there a channel you can cold call to? So instead of direct sale, let's say it's $25,000 a year, if you can find a channel where if you can win their relationship, they could potentially bring you 10 deals a year. So for the videos, if there's a in-between partner that's bigger than you, that has access to lots of their clients, and then you can view, if you win them, each one of their clients is sort of like a department of an enterprise. That's the way I would look at it is, so if you win a client or a partner that has 200 clients, those are 200 little divisions you could win that could equal an enterprise client or something similar.
Running out of questions? I have one more.
So So basically, we're in a situation, so we're in a startup, and we're in a situation where we want to be essentially a software as a service. But our first client is, they seem to be pushing back and they want to basically just have it in-house. So what's the best way to kind of get around, having them, bring it in-house and just use software as a service? Because from our perspective, it's clearly going to be easier to update it, to maintain it, and make sure they have the latest, and we don't have to repackage.
Way we solve that problem is we offer a hybrid SaaS where we either offer them obtaining the hardware, but more often than not, they can buy stuff cheaper than we do. And so we call it hybrid SaaS. We put it behind their firewall and satisfy all their security and privacy requirements. We charge them on an annual basis. And that seems to be working so far.
I mean, despite your desire to be SaaS, I would say, I think one of the fundamentals is don't ask your customer to perform an unnatural act. If that's not the way they want to buy, let them buy the way they want to buy. If you make money off it, is your goal to be a SaaS company or is it to be a profitable business?
I'll take a bit of a contrarian view there.
Oh, come on with it.
Yeah. And it's not that Aaron's wrong, but it kind of goes to what's repeatable in your business. So what's your support structure going to look like if you do what they want? Can you sell that same solution now to other people in the same way? Or are they going to be an island? They're going to be the only ones doing it in that way. Because if they're the only ones doing it in that way, they're not a good customer for you, right? You're going to have a support structure and infrastructure that's not sustainable. If you think that you can sell it that way to other people as well, or you're getting that request from multiple people, then maybe you need to rethink your business model, such that you support that. But in my mind, it's all about repeatability. You want to turn off the sausage grinders as much as you possibly can, right? And sell the same thing to as many people as possible. That's how you get the most amount of profitability. So the minute you start customizing, there's nothing wrong with it, but just realize that every time you do that, that cuts into your profit margin.
You may have fragmented your product line because you may have to provide both, make sure that there actually is a market for both, unless you have that one customer who will pay that big number for exclusivity there.
Are you planning to sell 10 of them? 10 clients or 1,000 clients in the next few years?
Realistically.
I mean, what's the goal in your business model? Is it 10 clients, 100 clients, or 1,000 clients?
If we hit 100, we'd be doing very well.
If you did 100, can you get to 100 putting the software, can you get to 100 putting the software in that hybrid model the way, can you do it that way?
I think it's possible, yeah.
You have to answer that question for yourself. Can you scale it to where you want to scale it in that way? So if Salesforce.com, client number one, if they wanted it to be in a hybrid model, they wouldn't be to where they are now. So it would be different. So you just have to think through. What I like to do is think 3 years in the future, how am I? If everything worked out the way I wanted it to work out, can I have 100 clients? Can I support it? Can I sell it? Can I do it that way? If you can't, then I wouldn't go down. If you're not comfortable, if you don't believe in that model, then don't go down that model.
And you better believe Salesforce.com was asked to go hybrid many, many times when they first started, right? And that's, hindsight's 20/20, right? So you can say now, they were brilliant. They could have made a huge mistake, right? And this guy going hybrid might be.
Let me say this, the hybrid model, it's the same code base.
I'm with you, it's not. Your support structure is gonna be completely different. The
You have to
minute you
tap
say
into
I'm going
it, you have to
hybrid, your
distribute
support
it.
structure is completely different. And I'm not saying what you did is wrong
No,
at all.
I'm with you, we're sensitive to the issue, but, yes.
You asked how to discourage your customer. Price is a great way to do that. Find the point at which they're unwilling to buy it in the hybrid or in the client server model. So I think we're running out of gas here. Maybe you want a couple more statements here, and we'll wrap it.
I just want to say one more thing on that topic. So I would actually sit down with your potential customer and share with them your entire business model, right? This is how I plan to get big, because they're interested in your long-term success, right? If they buy from you, got a business, that doesn't help them. I would sit down with them and say, look, I came into this thinking I wanted to do SaaS, and here's why, and here's all the things we're doing, right? You're telling me to go over here, it just doesn't make sense to me. So help me understand, how can I be a profitable business and keep supporting you if you're gonna make me go over here? And let them be a partner in the decision.
So I think we're going to stop it right there. Let's have a big round of thanks for Aaron and his